Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. It's Monday again, October 7th, 2024. It's only been that once, as far as I can recall. In all the years we've done the show, it's only been October 7th, 2024, this one time. It is, of course, many will remark, the anniversary of the big and horrific attacks in Israel from out of Gaza under the Hamas umbrella, if you will. And so that date, calls out a lot to a lot of people. Now, since then, things have been a little crazy over there. And this is not meant to be a memorial to the day today on the show. We focus specifically, for the most part, on American politics. Not that we haven't commented on it along the way. But I think if you start out your day and you call out on October 7th and it's only the first anniversary of it, you're probably going to be asked to remark upon that at some point. There's a lot of things going on. Domestically, it is the first Monday in October, which is the beginning of the new Supreme Court term. So plenty of court analysts out with their previews of what's to come, what's on the docket, what they think the current Supreme Court is likely to do with it, and basically which of your basic rights that you've understood for all of your lifetime and that most people have understood for a good 200 plus years that will be a part of their basic package of rights. Some of us relative newcomers to the concept of actually having civil rights. Speaking of which, some of these things will be up in front of the Supreme Court. And you are rightly worried or nervous if you're thinking about what this means. And, of course, you're thinking ahead to the presidential election and what kind of impact it can have on, what rights you continue to enjoy, if any, in the future under the Supreme Court. If we learned anything over the weekend, good for you. I tried not to, but if we learned anything over the weekend, perhaps you sat around on Saturday and listened to our special bonus episode of Kagro in the Morning, in which I finished reading you the entirety of Jack Smith's special counsel filing, and it's a motion, although it didn't really style itself in the title of what the motion was about. But it is in response, essentially, to the Supreme Court's ruling that any trial court taking on specifically, I should say, the January 6th trial court, if they're taking it on, but really trying any of Donald Trump's crimes, and there are several courts handling them, need to address the question of their crazy-ass ruling on presidential immunity, which sort of ties the two of these things together. And reading all the way through and then analyzing why it was that this was even necessary to do a filing like this brought up an interesting point, and a lot of writers did address it over the weekend, the disgrace of this Trump v. United States decision and how essentially un-American and unconstitutional on its face ordinarily this sort of doctrine would be. But now it's actually the law of the land. Hooray! Because that's the way the Constitution sets up the Supreme Court. So perhaps we'll talk a little bit about that. But having spent Thursday and Friday reading the bulk of the fact recitation, I thought I would read you the application of the law on Saturday. I couldn't wait. I couldn't justify spending all of Monday on it because Greg Dworkin will be here, and he's got a raft of stories that take us in another direction. We have to stay current on the news. So I hope you enjoyed that. I think we might have expanded our audience a little bit. I shared it on social media a bit, and people seem to be interested in putting a pin in that and coming back to it at some point. It's tough. It took me 7 hours to read through it. But, it was an interesting chore and interesting to watch the response to it. I guess it's something that we might have to consider doing as specials from now on when these important filings come through like this. Not every single document is that important, But this was pretty important to get a recitation of the facts, and it's a circumscribed set of facts too. Some of the most damning activity that there was really has been excluded from the record thanks to the Supreme Court, which is really a remarkable thing. But if you read or heard me read or heard someone else read, for that matter, the special counsel's motion and the recitation of the facts, you could be excused for wondering why Donald Trump is still walking free at the minimum. But the worst stuff has been excluded because the Supreme Court decided that actually weaponizing the Justice Department is well within your rights as President of the United States. All right, so we've got that to catch up on, plus a lot more, of course, and also some strange phenomenon. Is one of those things that no one really understands exactly why it takes off on social media, but I noticed when I saw someone call it out this morning, lots of people not retweeting, but on Blue Sky, and I guess probably retweeting it too, an article that actually is relatively old, but a thing about Senator Mike Braun, I never really know how he pronounced it. I think he just says Brown, from Indiana, commenting to somebody, and for some reason, and I'm sure he had a basis for doing it, it was stupid and racist, but the basis was talking about how interracial marriage ought to be, like abortion, I guess, the way they think of it, left to the states, which is code for, let's get rid of federal protections, and some states that I think are really conservative will ban it. Now, he may be in for a surprise given what has happened with abortion, and some of the conservative states that he thought would ban abortion did not, or at least their populace didn't want it when they went to the polls to discuss it. But their legislatures did. Anyway, as it turns out, I saw a lot of people retweeting this as though it were news, and I read it as though it were news too, and made some comments on it. And somebody pointed out, "Hey, this is like a 2-year-old article. This is from March of 2022." So it's still true, still applicable, and probably all the things you thought about Mike Brown when you saw it in the last couple of days, if you saw it in the last couple of days, were true then and are true now. And okay, yes, Greg points out he's currently running for governor, and that's, I'm sure, why people dug this thing up. That's probably the answer. And that and a good sip of coffee will get you far. Good morning, Greg. How are you? I know you're waiting
patiently.
Good morning, just fine. Having a snack,
I am totally enjoying the golden age of podcasts, actually.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of volunteering you to do specials.
All right. Well,
you do them.
Yeah. I was okay with that one. That was just literally, I finished on Friday. I ran out of time on Friday and said, there's a lot of stuff in here. And people are going to be left hanging. I don't know if anybody's going to listen to all this anyway. I'd already put out, 2 hours on Thursday and then really hour and a half on Friday. There was half hour of other news. And then, okay, Saturday, I'll put it out there. If nobody's forcing anybody, but there's a lot of interest in it. And I guess, occasionally things like this, these big documents, long articles, investigative reports, etc. People are interested in reading them, but I'm interested in reading them, but no one really sits down. And of course, if you're reading it on a PDF, people want it on paper or vice versa, whatever, but nobody's going to print the thing out, and it's not time to sit by the fire yet. And also, maybe you're cleaning up hurricane damage where you live, and, at a minimum, I'll use a little bit of my electricity to, play something to keep my mind off the fact that I'm cleaning up pieces of house.
Maybe you're just waiting for a Cat 3 hurricane to hit you.
Right, yeah.
And so what
am I going to listen to while I evacuate?
By listening to a podcast.
Right. Podcasts are everywhere. People love them. I actually produce one.
I listen to one while I work out on the treadmill, which is to say, get on for 45 seconds and go, whew, like John Candy used to, and say, okay, I'm done.
Well, anyway, so we occupied a lot of people's time, but it is also, there's big, podcast news you sent me this morning, so
we're
ready to
get
to it.
That a little bit.
Okay.
So here's the intro. The other day, Politico Playbook writes, and I quote, "After avoiding the media for nigh on her whole campaign, Kamala Harris is still largely avoiding the media. The VP is set for a series of interviews that likely won't press her on tough issues, even as voters want more specifics. And then, points to a click that they want you to click on to get the playbook.
Oh, I don't want
Alexi McCammond, who is a MSNBC political analyst, laughs and says, how can you write the VP is set for a series of interviews and is still largely avoiding the media in the same tweet? How can you do that?
I meant me.
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly right. It was another one, I think, was from Andrea Mitchell. NBC's Andrea Mitchell says Kamala Harris needs to double down on more interviews and serious interviews. She's got such a big problem with men, big problem. But also the business world, they don't think she's serious. They don't think she's a heavyweight. So I'm really pleased that Andrea Mitchell brought her insight on what Alan Greenspan thinks to national television so that we can all hear it. But skipping that, what Harris did is just incredibly smart. She decided, and this is, part of the discussion. So I want to bring you back.
All right.
To the glory days of the 2000s during the Iraq War, when you were a legacy blogger.
Oh.
And I wrote this morning, as a legacy blogger from the 2000s, David had a blog of his own called Congress Matters, and then also was on Daily Kos as a front pager. And then he and I did a different blog together with Marcy Wheeler and a couple other people.
Yes.
The Next Hurrah, Dana Houle.
Yeah.
As a legacy blogger from the 2000s, I'm fascinated by where podcasts take us and who they reach. Political reporter from Washington Post, I wrote, which is a true story, approached me at a panel we were both on. This was not a blogger ethics panel. This was a bird flu panel. And told me we were despicable because whether we were subject matter experts or not, we were giving this stuff away for free, and that was horrible.
Yeah, that was unusual.
That's the background for this. I mean, the big podcasters these days get paid a lot more than we ever did, if we did it all.
Ever. What? Yeah. Oh, well,
so the resentment must be that much greater these days.
That's true. And it's still there. I mean, I don't know what these guys with the famous podcasts get, but we heard the other day that the liars were getting $100,000 per episode somehow. I don't even know how that worked.
Right. So Benji Sarlin had a couple of good threads on this, which they're brief, so I want to read them to you. So there's a kind of lost knowledge. Linear TV's many challenges, said Connor Sen. Podcasts are just more interesting.
Okay.
So Benji Sarlin said, there's a kind of lost knowledge aspect to this too. Meet the Press used to have a much longer interview, and it reproduced some of the podcast appeal. Now they wanted to be short and punchy and then spend 45 minutes with their panel.
Yes.
Charlie Rose was a longtime venue for those longer, looser sit-downs. Of course, Charlie had his own issues, but that's different. But maybe what we're seeing is the old format make a comeback, in the long interview.
That would make sense, along with so many other things, milk and cheese and eggs straight from the farm kind of thing.
Right. So
now back as
All
hot
the Smoke
partisan. Yeah.
is a blog done by two NBA stars. Each has a ring. Each was there for 14 years. It's basically a sports blog, but a bunch of other stuff. They had Kamala Harris on the other day.
That's always a good entree to, real life stuff. And you want to hear from your sports guys.
And then she was on Call Her Daddy, which is the one most people are talking about for a variety of reasons, which I'll get to, but including the fact that it's enormous. It's like the second most popular blog after Joe Rogan.
Yes, of course, I knew, nothing about it naturally.
Yeah, I mean, and
that means it's huge.
Yeah.
If I don't know,
there's another blog
that means it's very popular,
which is made up of a bunch of Arrested Development actors, which Tim Walsh is going to be on.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and
I just finally caught up on that show.
The banter between the hosts, like you.
Yeah, right. Oh, sure. I would imagine that would be a lot of fun. And I finally did watch Arrested Development, 10 years after they were done with it. But I watched it. Now I'm up on it. Oh, I'd like to see that.
From Will and Grace. And so they're doing stuff. And Benji Sarlin writes, listening to All the Smoke and Call Her Daddy episodes with Harris, it's notable that the childless cat lady's biological children talk comes up prominently in both. And this remains something that broke through beyond politics. junkies. And it's especially interested because on Call Her Daddy, Kamala Harris did a really interesting thing with the Sarah Huckabee Sanders criticism of Harris, where Sanders said something along the lines of childless cat ladies don't have children and therefore haven't ever learned to be humble. So
being dumb as a brick
Alex
make you
Cooper,
humble?
the interviewer, who, again, this is a very substantive interview for 45 minutes. Kamala Harris is asked the following question. I saw the governor of Arkansas said, my kids keep me humble. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble. How did that make you feel? And Harris said, I don't think she understands that there are a whole lot of women out here who aren't aspiring to be humble. This isn't the 1950s anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a church thing.
Yeah, families come in all kinds of shapes and forms. You know, she could have added, and I don't use my baby Fundy voice either.
Yeah. Right.
And that was, that was more substantive than anything you're going to hear from, well, Donald Trump lied about you. What's your response? Which is all you get from the so-called
Yes, well, that's
interviews.
true. That was at least a different question.
But it gives you an idea, and I want to give you another idea. I had a clip
right.
I want to play for you a little bit from this interview.
I have it.
But I want to set it up first. And
Okay.
so that was the purpose of discussing the whole media reaction to this sort of thing.
Well, that's what I used it for then.
Yeah. So Dylan Scott says, I think a big lesson to this campaign, maybe, that's assuming Harris wins, that the mainstream media isn't even that useful to Democrats anymore in terms of messaging or reaching their voters. Obviously, a lot of MSM people, mainstream media people, disagree and think Harris is sabotaging herself by not talking to them. But whether that's astute analysis or a self-interested industry trying to insist upon its relevance remains to be seen. Again, previous discussion we just had. I'll add this, says Dylan Scott. I myself have become much more cognizant of how limited each of our viewpoints is, even the most well-read of us. Now, you and I spend a lot of time looking at media, reading reports, and so on and so forth. And all of these podcasts are new to us.
Yes, right.
So I think Dylan Scott makes that point really well. I see it so clearly now. Every time somebody describes either a campaign's message or the salience of certain issues in a way I find alien, and I think about this, and the underlying media diets that create it when we talk about media strategy, a lot of people vote, more than the human mind can conceptualize. Some of these people, a lot of them, are receiving information in ways you wouldn't believe, and I would add, and they don't include a sit-down interview with Chuck Todd.
Right. Not even for me.
Yeah.
So that's a very limited universe.
Right. So the clip is from Call Her Daddy and interviewing Kamala Harris, and if you could play a little bit of it,
I
that'd
will.
be great.
Have you ever seen this podcast before this?
No.
Well,
first of all, it's audio.
Yes, right. No, it's video.
This happens to be a video clip that they put out because this is such a big thing and it's on YouTube. But the whole thing is about 40 minutes. They're doing this in like 7-minute clips.
All right. Sure. I was just sort of wondering, is it Call Her Daddy like she's your daddy, or are we saying like where is she? I don't know. Call her daddy and ask.
I don't know.
I'm not sure which one it is. Okay. The mystery unravels.
It's not for me. It's for Gen Z and millennial women.
Yeah, and a lot of them.
So I don't know, but I will tell you, it's the first time I ever heard it, and I didn't realize the size of it. Let me give you a little bit of idea before we even do that.
My fingers
This is from Victor Shee, who is Kamala Harris's Ute outreach person.
Yes. What?
And he says, I really need everybody to understand how big Call Her Daddy and Alex Cooper is. It's the second most popular podcast in the world. It's got 5+ million downloads a week.
Man.
It's the most listened to podcast among women ages 18 to 24. It reaches a lot of people. It is not political.
That's why.
It was first owned by Barstool Sports.
That's why we suck. Oh, all right. Well, that helps with the launching pad. Good. All right.
So her podcast is wildly popular among the type of young people who may not traditionally trust or support Democrats. A lot of them are fairly conservative too, and they generally don't talk about politics. So with 3+ million followers on Instagram, 1 million on YouTube, more than 100,000 reviews on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify each, Alex Cooper not only reaches a massive audience, but her listeners and viewers are loyal, and will spend the time to listen to it. So it matters.
And they don't know why we keep thinking her name is Alice Cooper, which is not it. And they don't understand why that's weird.
After he heard the actual interview, he says, look, hear me out. More people my age have texted me personally saying they listened to this compared to any other legacy media source, and they say they now know Harris so much better. The Harris campaign knows what it's doing. Words to describe the episode: thoughtful, candid, rare, refreshing, meaningful. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure everybody who follows Alice Cooper agrees with this, but the act of VP Harris taking 40 minutes and having that dialogue with her matters for a lot of young people and women who would have never received this before. I'm sure we'll get more specific analytics, but her promo video describing that she doesn't do politics, she invited Harris on. She wasn't going to do this before. She had actually refused a request, an outreach from Biden and Harris at the time, and said, I don't do politics. And she said, but I'm doing this because it's women's issues, and that's what I do, and I feel like I have to. Trump is invited to be on the show if that's what he wants to talk about, but, so far he hasn't taken up the offer. So that promo video had 4+ million views on Instagram alone.
Really?
More than 10 million eyeballs.
Okay.
So given the reach,
10 million eyeballs. All right. Well, we never did an eyeball count before. Here we go. Go. Ready, set, go.
At a rally in Pennsylvania, former President Trump recently told women, you will be protected and I will be your protector. Whoa. What do you make of that?
Remember the audience.
So he who, when he was president, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did just as he intended, and there are now 20 states with Trump abortion bans, including bans that make no exception for rape or incest, which we just discussed, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body they don't have a right to make a decision about what happens to their body next.
Two women immoral? Talking about this in personal terms to a women's audience.
Yeah. Do you need me to pause for it, or you keep rolling?
No, go ahead. I mean,
all right.
This is the same guy that is now saying that? This is the same guy who said that women should be punished for having abortions? This is the same guy who uses the kind of language he does to describe women? So, yeah, there you go.
Well, yeah.
I do want to focus on abortion for a moment because 2 years ago, Roe v. Wade was overturned and women lost their constitutional right to an abortion. I put out an episode about it. I flew to North Carolina. Yeah. I went to a preferred women's health center. I met with women that were getting screamed at and chanted at and called baby killers, and it was the most eye-opening experience I've ever had because I am a privileged white woman that lives in Los Angeles, and I am so aware of that. I understand that a lot of the younger generation sees things online and is like, what is right, what is wrong, what is real, what is not. Can you explain and talk about what is actually happening to abortion access right now in this country?
Yeah. So again, I thank you for what you've been doing and at the earliest stage of this and following the stories. So, on public policy, I often tell my team, look, I don't want to hear about public policy is a fancy kind of speech or paper. Tell me how it'll affect a real person. So let's talk about how it affects a real person.
So we can start.
Yeah, I'm going to pause it for a second. We're getting this episode taken down for sure.
No,
I'm not theirs, ours.
I don't think so.
Well, I say it's fair use, YouTube.
Do any more of it, but
right.
You
come here and
flavor.
I'll fight you. Yeah.
You get the feeling of it. This is how she does her shows. And, it's sort of The View, but more intense.
Yeah.
And, it's
one-on-one.
It's for a specific audience. Meanwhile, all the smoke, 2 very tall black dudes talking to
NBA?
her about growing up with a mixed family. One of them has a mixed family.
All right.
Talking about being step parents and talking about what it means to the community and what it means to go to an HBCU and they were talking about what it's like to, I could have gone there, but I didn't. I went to UCLA because they had a much better sports facility, and I love the HBCUs, but they can't compete with like what we do. And Harris talked about that in depth.
Mm-hmm.
Said, no, it's true. I mean, great minds, but not the physical facilities. That's why we're donating so much money through the Biden administration toward rebuilding those facilities. You're absolutely right. You need to go where the facilities are that'll take you to do what you do. But that's why traditionally where they came from is so important, why they exist is so important. Building them and maintaining them is so important. Infrastructure is important. And you just spelled out why. And it was a really interesting discussion for that audience.
Yeah.
And so what happens is Harris is on these pods directing her discussion about her and letting the audiences know who she is, but doing it in a way that fits the audience that's seeing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the media complaining that she's not on Chuck Todd answer, well, Donald Trump just said this lie. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
This was so substantive. Each one of these is 40, 45 minutes in depth, and it's great. Both of them are great.
Well,
Oh, by the way, it reaches a lot of people.
Yes.
So what are you complaining about, media?
Me? Who, me? Oh, them. All right. They're complaining about that they didn't get the interview. They didn't get to take it to their boss and say, give me a raise because I got the big interview.
Right.
That's basically it. And for all the people who believe in the power of elect the one that you'd rather have a beer with or whatever, at this stage of the game, it's now, who went on the podcast that I like and talked like a real person for 10 seconds?
So I think, I don't know the full history of all this smoke. It's Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. Each of them have a ring. Each of them, had 14 years in the NBA. I think it was like an ESPN spinoff.
Yeah.
Also a very large audience and really excellent interviews. And by the way, those guys are really tall.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's how they get into the NBA. Are you hearing the music today, by the way?
Yeah, I am.
All right. We have that fixed. My awesome audio engineer spent, I don't know, a good 15 minutes puzzling over this.
Yeah, but got the answer.
Yeah.
And so, it worked. And
awesome.
We'll talk a little bit more about all the smoke when we come back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on. Greg Dworkin doing the podcast, the other podcast roundup, the one that people are listening to. This is a podcast about the other podcasts that people are actually listening to.
Yeah, Bay Area sports, We Believe, Warriors, Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes. But first they talked about family. And, they talked about just some remarkably in-depth discussion of things like the HBCUs, as I mentioned, that normally don't come up on other broadcasts. And that's why it's so important to do this. Harris was totally comfortable, totally at home with both of them. Completely different audiences, similar message, but it was really a remarkably smart decision to do these things. And yes, they have their audience, and it's one of many things that Harris is doing that Andrea Mitchell may not approve of and doesn't get and doesn't understand. Should Harris go on to win, which I think she will, even though it's pretty close,
I'm going to say, why don't we just declare victory now? I read over the weekend that you can do that.
You can do that. Then people are going to look back on this and say, gosh, that was smart.
Yeah. Or criminal.
Whatever. So this is a Twitter account called TV Mojo, Joe.
Oh, okay.
Trump goes on a slew of male-friendly podcasts, many of them filled with open sexism or worse. New York Times. He's courting the broverse. It's brilliant. Harris does 60 Minutes, The View, Colbert, and a female-centered podcast, I would add, and All the Smoke. She's hiding out in friendly territory.
Yeah, that's their view. Did they say that?
The New York Times
I thought he was just
said you're hiding out in friendly territory. Or at least far less probing than a traditional news interview would be. She got more personal information out than any traditional news interview would ever have gotten out.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I don't watch the traditional interviews is, well, I know what they're going to, I know what topics they'll ask about, and I know what kind of answers.
You know what she's going to say.
Going to get. Yeah, right.
What's the point of watching? So let me send you the actual
Tell us about your policy.
New York Times point here that they thought they were making.
Yeah.
The Call Her Daddy interview is part of several appearances Ms. Harris will make this week with news outlets and niche podcasts or radio shows. Several of the platforms are considered to be friendly to her, or at least far less probing than a traditional news interview would be. Friendly to her, that means they're women.
Yeah, or normal. Regular people who are. Tell me about why you shouldn't be eating cats.
Right.
What?
And they are confusing, as many others have pointed out. Hostile with substantive.
That's true too. I mean, that is, and that's always been that's an interesting point.
Oprah gets stuff out of you. It's not a question of friendly. That
is definitely true. We have this weird, I guess, what would it be, like semiotics, but where a good interview is a hard-hitting interview. Well, I mean, and is that because it hits you hard, or is it because they're hitting the person that they're interviewing? It's supposed to hit you hard.
What is the hardest-hitting interview show on television, at least by reputation?
So
hard-hitting, they don't even have scary theme music. Is it your cue?
My scary theme music? Well, is this scary theme music, or is it the thunder and lightning
clock ticking?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. 60 Minutes.
And
right.
she's on it tonight.
Oh.
And Trump refused to go on it. And despite that, they're still saying.
Well, I'm not going on because it's failing.
On hard-hitting interviews. What are they talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. She should go on as the Martin Short character.
Hard-hitting, she's there. And she's also going to do Howard Stern, who's a superb interviewer.
Yeah. Now.
The View, which has a huge audience. What are they even talking about? They can't even make this case for themselves.
It's just them. It is what they mean. She's not giving me the interview I need to get promoted.
Then they go on to say, Ms. Harris will sit for an interview with the news program 60 Minutes, which will be broadcast Monday evening, that's tonight. But interviews with personalities like Ms. Cooper, Ms. Harris' advisors insist, are part of a strategy that will target groups of voters who may not be television watchers and may not be getting their information from mainstream news platforms. Well, duh.
Yeah, and also, duh to the reporters who don't also, I mean, things have changed, things have grown, there are new influencers, but I mean, this was a boo-hoo story when Obama was going on podcasts and inviting them to the...
being a legacy blogger. You understand this to your core.
Right.
Saw it. You were there.
Yeah. And never getting invited to anything, but hey, you know. They did it, and people went, I don't understand this. Why are they... And even this time, they're giving seats to influencers. Yeah, like they did the last time, and the time before that, and the time before that. I mean... This has been happening for a decade.
Right. And it's still happening. And
you don't know?
It's just as meaningless now as it was then.
The fight, anyway. Yeah. And, look, the biggest news programs, the hard-hitting interviews, I mean, they're big, famous shows, and I guess they're culturally important, and we're told they're supposed to be cultural. People wear suits on them, and they display video and pictures in squares behind the newsreaders. That's serious. And Between Two Ferns over here with Alex Cooper is not because she's not part of the White House Correspondents Association.
I would rather hear about her response to Sarah Huckabee Sanders than a question about you're tight in the polls. What does that mean, and why is that?
Yeah.
Well, duh. We know why.
People want to hear about your policy. I don't want to hear about your policy.
And I don't want to hear about polls.
Right. And you love
polls. We talk
polls.
about polls all the time. We don't need to.
Right.
They're tied. There may be reasons for it. They may be right. They may be wrong. We'll see. Instead of talking, as somebody put it on the pundit roundup this morning, instead of talking about how they're weighted, which is to say, do they, adjust for the fact that there were X number of Trump voters in 2020 versus 2024, these polls ought to be weighted on. That is to say, just wait another month and we'll see what happens and we'll see whether they're right or wrong. You're not going to learn anything more from polls now. They're going to be close. So what?
I mean, it was a good question, too, the Sarah Huckabee Sanders one.
Great. And both interviews are full of questions like that.
Yeah. Well, someone bring me on their podcast so I can answer that question. I was curious about that. Because my mind went elsewhere. I mean, there's a million excellent answers to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, but I love the whole something, blah, 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 keep me humble. And what do you do again? I'm the governor of Arkansas. Why? Because my daddy was. Okay. That's pretty humble. Just pointing that out. Dad, give me a job. All right, here, Donald Trump needs an idiot to lie for him. All right, thanks. What am I going to do next? I don't know. I guess I'll govern the state. I guess I'm entitled to that.
The other day when we were talking about the vice presidential debate that nobody remembers anymore, except for the last line, which was that Vance wouldn't admit that Trump lost.
Right. Yes, right? And that got a lot more attention.
So the news media was criticizing Walz because, he didn't say what they would have said if they projected themselves on the stage instead of him.
Yeah, why not?
And the audience didn't care because they sort of liked Walz, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, and what did the media do with it over the weekend? As they said, so I understand people like the whole "that's a damning non-answer" thing. Why don't maybe the serious people should ask the other serious people that they're interviewing this weekend the same question. So they did. Mike Johnson. Oh, no.
Right,
what
and
a
then
horrible
the response was, well, why do you keep asking this question? And you're only going to get the same answer, and the answer is that the audience needs to hear that it's a non-answer, just like Tim Walz said. Guess what? He got it right.
Yep. So good, and even the media admits it by copycatting it, and then not that stopped them from
crediting it.
Yeah, and it didn't stop them from criticizing him for giving that. He lost the debate. He was shaky at first, and then he hit such a home run that we all stole the same question and asked Mike Johnson, who said it was a gotcha question, to ask him, who is the president of the United States right now? And I'm not certain. Are you asking me a hard-hitting gotcha journalism question, or are you testing me for a head injury?
Yeah,
I'm not certain what kind of question this is. Who
won in 2020? Well, Joe Biden was elected. Yes, but did Trump lose? Well, Joe Biden was elected. Yeah. I mean, so it's pretty exposed to those who watch those shows, and nobody does, that, these guys don't want to answer that.
Yes.
So interestingly,
it's because they'll hang you.
There's a subtle shift I'm seeing and feeling this morning.
Yeah.
From the commentators, talking heads. Charlie Sykes did it in his Substack this morning. I heard it on Morning Joe from Heilman, and they're talking about the fact of Trump is really worried he's going to lose, and it's a big deal to him because he doesn't want to go to jail. I'm just sending this to you at the very end here. And therefore, the substance of the discussion is switching to, what happens when Trump loses?
Yes.
Charlie Sykes, right. Desperation. Trump knows he may face prison if he loses. A desperate man is a dangerous man, and Trump's a man without scruples who has nothing to lose if he burns it all down. His base absolutely expects him to win and will not accept the fact that he lost in a legitimate election. A Trump defeat will set off shockwaves of disbelief that will ride into January and beyond. This time, Trump has the infrastructure in place, including an entire political party that's been conditioned to acquiesce or actively support his complaints, no matter how full of shit.
Hey. Yeah.
That's what it says.
I know.
What it says.
Yeah, I'm
He will try again to get GOP legislatures to overturn results. This time they might go along. Yeah, and Heilman talked about what worries me, what keeps me up at night isn't a Trump win, it's a Trump loss, and what happens after that. So 2 points there. The subtle shift is, it really looks like Trump is losing.
Shift.
And then, by the way, what does that mean? That's scary.
Yeah. Who are we reading there? What is this?
That was Charlie Sykes.
Okay.
But Heilman was saying the same thing on Morning Joe this morning.
Yes.
I did send you a link just above what you were reading.
Okay, I got it. I'm just sort of wondering, I want to read on, do they say, so what should we do? I mean, I don't know if anybody really has a good answer. And,
Well,
and the answer,
I'll tell you what the
can't
good
say
answer
the
is.
answer.
Win by a lot.
Yes, and if they still do it, then the answer is you can't really say it right now. But the criminal justice system will be taking care of things at that point.
Exactly right.
We hope.
But be a lot more prepared for it than you were last time.
That's true. It's a good point. He's more prepared. But yeah, there's a special counsel right now that just laid out why this is criminal.
You declare it a special event. They've already done that.
I declare this.
You have the National Guard activated
event
beforehand. They've already done that.
We have the presidency at this point and can do that.
Yeah, exactly right. So, not the same.
Right. That's true. He doesn't do it for, I don't know whether he understands the differences, Donald Trump, which is fine. I mean, it's now an open alligator pit. You're going to walk into it? Yeah. All right. Okay. Now you'll get the consequences you should have got last time because you held the reins of power last time. And now someone else does. And, well, you fell in. Boo-hoo. All right. That's a good point, though, and worth pointing out. And I don't know, go on podcasts where people want to talk about sports and tell them who won the game. The Giants won their game.
Not if Mike Pence has the courage to.
Right. It could still be overturned. But then you can tell them, by the way, the things we're going to have to look out for is there are people who do not believe that anyone will be voting for Kamala Harris. They think all people who say they support Kamala Harris are AI. And when she, cleans up and beats them, they're going to go crazy. And this time we have to arrest them. And just, I'm sorry.
Can you do another clip? It's not from that show that you get in trouble for.
Okay. Which one?
All the way at the bottom. Very, very bottom. Just
okay. Well, yes, let me start. You start setting that up, and I will
it's 2
start
minutes,
talking about
and this is a poster called Decoding Fox News, who spends a lot of time looking at the PBS NewsHour. That's the McNeil-Lehrer hour without McNeil and Lehrer.
Yeah, the McNeil-less and Lehrer-less hour. Okay.
Right, and then comparing it to what Fox News says on the same topic, so that you get a sense of how Fox News covers it versus how a real report does it.
That is a valuable service. All right,
and it's very short.
Okay, let's see. Well,
but
I'm going to have to.
It covers the topic of the day beyond, podcasts and how important they are and the politics of what's going on. We're talking about hurricanes. Okay. We're talking about the second big lie. The big lie, of course, is the stealing the election in 2020, which didn't happen. And then
that's how much of a lie
this year's two big lies were lying about immigrants, but also lying about hurricane relief.
Yes, that's the
both
new
of which are
lie.
hurting people.
Yeah, it's really horrific. All right, well, we'll roll this one, and then I'll be prepared to boost the volume if necessary.
Do it.
All right.
Against the backdrop of a shattered
necessary.
furniture store, former President
This
Trump
is
stopped
PBS.
in hard-hit Valdosta, Georgia today, saying it was no time to campaign.
Today, Donald Trump, he flew to Valdosta, Georgia,
That's
to
how
witness
Fox
the
with Sean
devastation up front and personal and firsthand, and meet with disaster relief specialists from Franklin Graham himself and Samaritan's Purse.
But
So Franklin Graham is a relief specialist now?
Yeah, he does. He runs Samaritan's Purse, and they do go and do relief stuff.
Okay.
A little proselytizing, too, but they do relief stuff. It's
Yeah,
legitimate.
all right, okay, fine. He's wrong, all right. Let's see, there's more, though. PBS again.
just an hour earlier, as he arrived in the area, Trump accused the Biden-Harris administration of mishandling Hurricane Helene.
They're not being responsive. The federal government is not being responsive, but they're having a very hard time getting the president on the phone. He won't get on, and of course the vice president, she's out someplace campaigning, looking for money.
That was not true. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp this morning thanked President Biden for calling him yesterday about the storm.
He just said, hey, what do you need? He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that.
Now, noticeably missing on the ground.
Now on to Fox, right? So the same story covered by Fox.
President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala, well, she spent the weekend on the West Coast where she attended a very glitzy fundraiser in Los Angeles with her Hollywood friends.
And as for the vice president,
PBS.
she actually cut short a campaign and fundraising trip, canceling events in Nevada to attend a hurricane briefing at FEMA headquarters in D.C.
We will continue to do everything we can to help you recover and to help you rebuild.
You can stop there. You get the picture.
I do. I've gotten several
and
of them.
Then I had some dude on Twitter saying, so where is Harris?
Yeah,
Why
that's their
isn't
line.
she campaigning? Why isn't she out doing daily 3-time-a-day campaign? And
I see.
It's like she has a day job. Well, what does the vice president do? The vice president doesn't do any. The vice president attends all these briefings with the president. And the vice president actually does have an active office. Yes, well, I will cite to you what John Adams said about the vice president. Well, you're not getting the picture here.
Yeah.
Right? She is doing multiple things at once. She's campaigning. She's preparing podcasts. She's doing fundraising. She's attending briefings. She's in Georgia. She's going to be in North Carolina. She's trying to do it in a way that avoids putting herself in a situation where they have to drop search and rescue and recovery in order to accommodate her, security issues and close the one road, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, she's doing it smartly. And if it's not enough for you, you're an idiot.
Yeah. I don't know, and you could get off of social media and go find out what she's doing.
This is not Biden. This stuff isn't going to stick. You can't do that.
No. So Trump spent the weekend repeating this thing over and over again that they were not only that I can't get Biden on the phone. He's all of this stuff. He's saying
Plus,
that they're ignoring Republicans.
And then when he went back to Butler and had all his Christian revivalist worshipers there, he said the Democrats are responsible for trying to kill me. I mean, this is the dangerous stuff Hyman was talking about.
Yeah. And he brought Elon Musk with him, who I think he called Leon Musk, which is funny.
Has the same warm and fuzzy feeling and ability to reach out as J.D. Vance does, except worse.
Also, interestingly, Trump was the shortest of the three of them when they got together, which is interesting.
That right?
Yeah. They were all tall guys. That's not all the smoke tall, but that was interesting. And I don't know. The one thing that came out of the whole rally thing was Elon Musk was there. Did he speak? I don't know. All I know is they circulated.
He jumped in the air.
Yeah, that's it. They circulated the photo of him jumping in the air like he was at a concert or something, and his shirt rides up, and he looked ridiculous. And then it's just people were, of course, taking that still frame of him jumping in the air and looking crazy and photoshopping it into everything. If I could Photoshop, I would have been, dipping him in a vat of acid or something. But people had him, I don't know, riding on elephants. I saw one of them turned upside down and hanging like Mussolini. Even it was not a great moment for either of them. And by the way, of course, still the same game in the mainstream media. It's very difficult to pin down Elon Musk's politics. He's now speaking at Trump rallies, and they're still like, I don't know.
He's funding millions of dollars worth of right-wing.
Oh, another big story for the last couple days.
Yeah, it's easy to pin down his politics.
Sure, of course it is. He wears it on his sleeve, and
he's a reactionary Nazi. What's the issue?
That's it. You said it. That's the end of that segment. It's true. And, I don't know why they keep pretending this game. That has been a big story the last couple of days. We haven't really gotten to it, apparently, during the last, the midterm campaigns in 22?
I'm not saying what his politics are, but he thinks apartheid was good.
Yeah. And
so
I guess that's why he's not there anymore. And, but he funded Stephen Miller's PAC's very, very darkly racist TV campaigns to the tune of $25+ million a month at the end of the last campaign. They were flush with cash, and they were flooding the airwaves with these completely ridiculous racist commercials. And as it turns out, it was almost exclusively Elon Musk's money, which, by the way, we all gave to him to launch his stupid rockets. He's got billions in government contracts, which should be reviewed, because, I don't know, we just learned from the Republicans that this is what they're doing. This too, another story of the day. Republicans now threatening the federal contracts of any company that employs anybody who gets quoted in a newspaper saying that Trump or Vance is not their choice for president.
So Daniel Dale, you remember Daniel Dale?
It would be a lie to say I don't.
He's now fact-checking for CNN, has been for a while, but he made his chops elsewhere earlier. So he published this thing, fact check, my timeline fact check of his 6 days and counting of Helene dishonesty.
Yes.
And I spent a lot of time on today's Pundit Roundup talking about Helene dishonesty. That's really what the topic and subject was. And Daniel Dale notes that Trump has lied about the federal hurricane response with staggering frequency and variety. I don't think he's getting what he needs to out of the other stuff. It's interesting. There was a poll. I think it was the TIP poll that was this morning. TIP is a Republican write-up, but honest pollster, like Fox News, poll that showed Harris up by 3, same as before, with likely voters.
All right.
And I think as part of the write-up, I think it was TIP, could have been one of the other pollsters, but basically they were looking at what, individual topics the two candidates had better response from the public. And it turned out Trump had something like a +13 on border security and a +4 or 5, which isn't all that big, on crime. And they were tied on the economy. And this is like the 5th or 6th poll that has shown that they're about tied on the economy. So he's lost his edge on the economic stuff, which is why you don't hear him talk a lot about inflation. That's why he's doubling down on the eat cats and dogs stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting. I wonder if there's... Well, okay. Yes. I'll just say yes to that, although I was wondering whether there's a line of attack on that, which, certainly could be. Working on that subconsciously with everybody who has come around on the economy and say, by the way, for years, for decades, Republicans, and specifically Donald Trump in the last couple of years, has had this built-in advantage, and people have just come to realize he's actually very, very, very bad on the economy, which brings us down to even.
And business. He's a businessman, but actually it turns out he's very bad on business.
Terrible at both. He's terrible.
He both goes bankrupt and gets sued and loses.
And doesn't understand how economies actually work, which is why he's always babbling about tariffs.
This morning, Committee for Responsible Budget, or whatever it is they call themselves, Trump's budget would double the deficit compared to what Harris's would do.
Yeah. And on top of all that, in his private business dealings, he launches Donald Trump Media and loses his shirt on it, his orange stained shirt. But same thing, he still enjoys this lead on things like border security and crime. And the truth is, he should be losing on all of those too. He knows less about those things than he does about the economy, and everyone's finally coming around to realizing he doesn't know what he's talking about on the economy. He may or may not know how to steal money from people with scams, but that's not an economy. Similarly, racism isn't border security.
But regardless of what's moral or not moral or amoral, he's figured out people do not like what he calls illegal immigration. They don't like it. It doesn't poll well.
That's true. He doesn't know anything about it.
And he puts it in 4th grade language. Yeah. I mean, it's not a joke. People actually look it up and say, okay, he's talking at the level of a 4th grader. That is good because that's what the voters hear.
That's how they understand. But
that's how they understand.
Yeah, and there were some people who like that and who just can't, who will never shift from that. But for the persuadables, since we're always talking about that, you might say to them, he's got this advantage on border security. And do you know what the advantage is? The advantage is that one side says, well, we should try this, we should try that, we should have asylum programs, we should have restrictions, we should have more border security, we should have a program with a path to legal citizenship for others. And Donald Trump says, kill them all, round them up, put them in concentration camps. I don't care what happens to them. They're eating cats and dogs. How can you say that guy is better on border security?
I understand what he's saying. All this other stuff is complicated.
Right. Well, I mean, it's okay. It's even an okay answer to go and say, this stuff you think it's not complicated, so I won't say it's complicated, but I will say that the answer is complicated. These are human beings, and you have to find a way of dealing with them as human beings, and human beings in crisis. And I know that makes you, feel mushy inside. But the opposite, the other answer, the other party's answer is wholesale murder and mayhem. That's not an answer.
So this discussion started with Daniel Dale talking about lying about the hurricane response. But as you point out, Trump also lies about the border stuff. He also lies about everything.
Well, yes.
And this was a really interesting response from Jay Nordlinger, who is a conservative who works at National Review.
Yes.
Daniel Dale published his tweet there. Trump has lied about the federal hurricane response with staggering frequency. And Nordlinger said, in my opinion, the country is not divided between those who believe Trump's lies and those who don't. It's divided between people who think the lies matter and people who don't. Between those who say, this isn't right, and those who yawn.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. He's correct about that.
Yes. Although, it is troublesome that there are people who say, that is right. There's the third group. But, they're crazy, and those are the non-persuadables, and you don't deal with them.
No, it's mostly this, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, Trump is being accused of the same stuff.
I mean, I do it sometimes.
Whatever,
right?
Trump just the same stuff. Yawn. You shouldn't be yawning at this stuff. It matters. No. It's real.
Well, that's true.
And again, I go back
to
what
yawning.
We started with these podcasts, with Harris talking about how and why this stuff is real.
Yes.
And I think it breaks
True.
through.
We broke off
I think
at that
it
point.
makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it'll help.
I think so too, and maybe maybe sufficient time has passed such that in the next segment I can play the rest of the answer where she was just setting up. Let me tell you how it really matters to people, and I don't know. I guess they can sue me afterwards. Here's 10 cents, you win. You got it all. So, but people should hear that. This is a great point, and it is amazing that there are still people. It's interesting too because I think all the current political journalists certainly came up and grew up in the same era of the rise in popularity of this alternative media. I can't believe they haven't caught on to it, which I guess just reveals that it really is personal. I didn't get the interview, so therefore she's not talking to the media. But you would think at some point, and maybe it'll take another couple of years before they start to realize, or that they are listeners to these podcasts. Guess what? I heard about Kamala Harris. I didn't get the interview, but now I know something. I wonder when that will happen. 10 years, I suppose. All right. Oop, wrong one. Got the wrong music there. All right.
But I heard it.
That's true. The important part is that you and the millions of podcast listeners that I have, which is why I get $100,000 an episode, all heard the mistake, which is why I get $0 an episode. All right. It's not zero. We thank all of you who are chipping in and tolerating all of the mistakes. It's what makes us, understandable and on the right level. All right. Thanks, Greg. Let's do it again. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're a little off timing with the crazy mistake about the music. I don't know. I was looking at the wrong square on soundboard and pressed the wrong thing. And I guess at least it was music. I mean, there's a million other things I could have been pressing and accidentally end up. We'll be right back with more Kagro in the Morning.
And Dan Balls.
All right, see. Oh, that's the wrong one. I hit the wrong button on that one, but you get the idea. I said I would, so I will. Go back to the podcast that we began discussing with Greg, the Alex Cooper piece. Call her daddy, I guess. I mean, that's the name of the show. I need to listen to the show and hear how she says the name of the show so I know where the emphasis goes. But we stopped. This is a long clip. We stopped 2 minutes and 19 seconds into a 7 minute and 53 second clip preview. I mean, the interview itself is much longer, and they point that out at the end. This is just a preview clip. But we stopped at a moment where she was asked she's now on the abortion topic and saying, having set up her answer, Vice President Harris did, saying, I don't want to talk about the policy so much. I want to talk about how policy and laws affect real people and tell the stories. And this is a tried and true technique, not of her invention, but, true. Tried and true, both, that you win in politics talking about stories and explaining things in terms of stories. And, it can be done right and it can be done darkly and wrong. For instance, over on the other side, they know, well, I don't want to talk about, he could very easily say the same, I don't want to talk about policy, I want to talk about how these things affect people's real lives, and here's how. They're eating dogs, they're eating cats. You make up the stories. Now, the difference is you're supposed to tell real and true stories that, actually happen to people and are verifiable. And the news media loves, of course, to fact check those stories by trying to find the person about whom the story has been told and verifying that it really happened. After a while, they realized they can never do this with Trump because very often the person either doesn't exist or they told a different kind of story and he twisted it into something else, or it's been 20 years and they don't know exactly who said it. Anyway. Meanwhile, they'll fact check this one, and Kamala Harris said that this person had an abortion 4 years ago, and it's that it was actually 4.5 years ago. We rate this false. Anyway, so the real point is she tells stories to convey the political point, and we stopped right as she was going to tell such a story. So I thought we should hear the story. Let's go back to that.
The majority of women who receive abortion care are mothers. So if she's in a state, and by the way, every state in the South, except for Virginia, has an abortion ban. Okay? So imagine she's in a state with an abortion ban. 1 out of 3 women are, by the way, in our country.
And I'll point out here just a second. This is not an anecdote that she, I guess, collected along the way. She's giving an illustrative story. Supposing this were to happen, this is how. And I guess you could call that, well, that's a made-up story, except it's actually, there's a real basis in fact. Could there be such a person? There could be. Is it likely that there is such a person? Yes, that's the difference. Versus, I know a guy who saw a guy who saw a guy who said that he saw somebody steal a goose. That's one kind of story. And this is the reality. These states have abortion bans. Are there women in these states who become pregnant and don't want to be and are interested in seeking an abortion? Yes, 100%. No doubt about it. All right. So she's giving an example story. This is, again, still, though, the point stands. I'm illustrating how these laws and how abortion bans operate to affect real people that you can imagine because the situation is realistic. You don't have to rely on my friend's cousin's second husband once saw somebody something. You know that these are real happenings. All right. Where are we here? Oh, look, I just saw the ticker go up for the number of thumbs up on this clip here. Up to 4,000. Okay, keep rolling.
And she's a mom. So she's going to have to figure out, one, God help her if she has affordable childcare.
Doesn't.
God help her if she has paid leave. And then she's going to have to go to the airport, stand in a TSA line, sit on a plane next to a perfect stranger to go to a city where she's never been to receive the care she needs. She's going to probably have to get right back on that plane because she's got those kids. Her best friend's probably not with her because that's who's taking care of the kids.
Good point.
To get back in that TSA line, to get back on a plane, to go home.
And that's all if they can even afford the plane ticket or the bus ticket.
Exactly.
Because when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I remember my DMs were flooded with thousands of women begging me to help. And it's overwhelming. And I can't even imagine. I'm saying that in front of you, but it's overwhelming. And I remember people begging me like, I just need to afford a bus ticket so I can get out of this abortion desert that I live in the South so I can get to a state. But they can't even, you know what I mean? So it's like these people are literally landlocked into a position that they don't want to be.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing is that
I'm going to pause it for a second. That segment all by itself, I guess, stands on its own. It's a very true illustration, not hard to understand as a hypothetical. But I guess, now the fact checkers will be, well, that didn't really actually happen. It was all hypothetical. And she said, God help her if she has affordable child care and paid leave. God help her if she doesn't. Therefore, we rate this false. And I don't know anything about, I still just know nothing about Alex Cooper, although it's interesting that the story that was relayed to me earlier, I'm sure paraphrased from something where Greg was sort of passing on that she says, well, I don't do politics, I don't do this. I find that interesting. If I don't do politics on the show, and yet, you find that your DMs, direct messages, I suppose, on Twitter, your DMs are flooded for women begging her to help. And I'm not certain is that are they appealing to her, like, send me money so I can go travel? Or is it, please do something, please speak up about it? I'm just kind of curious about what that, and I have no doubt that her DMs were flooded. That's not a fact check on her or anything. I just, and if anything, it's a reality check on, are you sure that it's wise to say that you don't do politics? It's fine for programming. Like, I can see why you want to turn down political interviews for the most part. I would too. But, and I do. You notice we don't do a whole lot of interviews on this show. I mean, that's part of it too, is I don't want to be asking you the same stupid questions that everybody else is asking you. And B, if I ask you something good, you will, go on and eat up the whole show, and I'll have to let you do it because it'll be so interesting. And then what will I do for the rest of the show? So, all right. All right, Greg chimes in here saying the podcast is usually would they describe it that way? Raunchy Sex in the City live kind of show. Locker room talk for women is how she's described it. So, not the right setting for politics. And I guess this is even an unusual episode, if that's the case. So I guess that's sort of why it would make sense for listeners to be saying, I have this particular, it's related to sex. So I feel comfortable bringing that up to her. It's an interesting listen. I haven't heard her say I don't do politics, but it's probably true. And in general, something that you would say, I prefer to spend my time on something else. That's not what this show is about. But the thing that it is about, I guess it just illustrates the point, is that politics eventually permeates everything. You have the ability, and I guess they would acknowledge that too, right? Why is it that we even have the ability to publicly host a raunchy locker room sex talk show for women? And the answer is because there was a political fight that lasted 100 years to give women the right to do this in the first place. But yeah. And again, then that too, well, this is a woman's issue, as they sometimes tag it. And, then there are also women who would remind you, well, it's only a women's issue because there was a man around. And that's how we got this particular woman's issue dumped on our lap. So there is that. Anyway, it's well done. And I guess it's all the more impactful if someone who has a following like this says, well, look, I try not to get bogged down in politics because most people find it boring. They really do. But this one is not. And this one is in the middle of your life. And the rest of the segment is about, well, who's making it an issue? And you're like, how come this issue, which should be, you should be discussing it. It's a women's certainly on the mind of women. And but how interesting. The rest of this segment, maybe we got to play it, is, they'll call this abortion a woman's issue because it's primarily, the burden of it primarily falls on women, certainly. And the preoccupation with everything about it, how you get there and how you get out of it, is all left to women to be worrying about. And it's all left to women to be worrying about because the men who create this problem, by the way, are out there, quote unquote, solving it for everybody else. I'll tell you what you're allowed to do. I'll tell you what you can and can't do. And that's the rest of the segment, is all these male legislators who don't even know how any of it works except for how it happens in the first place. And maybe they don't even really understand that, because some of them have said, there's the old legitimate rape comments, right? women's reproductive systems don't work during rape. Like, there were people who really literally believed that. They kind of get around to that and saying, you don't understand anything about physically, about women and how their bodies work, and you're legislating on it. That's crazy. But then again, you have people out there saying, who really is brilliant about the economy? The guy who says tariffs should be 200%. He doesn't know anything about the economy, and thank God now he's only now tied on the economy. He should be 500 points behind on the economy, and he's not, because there are people who don't know anything about anything. But if a guy in a suit tells them, oh, he's an expert. I mean, it's one of those things. All right, let's see. There's some more clips and more comments being sent. Greg is keeping us up to date on this. Let's see. All right, we'll take a look at this. Podcaster Alex Cooper has shared her reasoning for interviewing Kamala Harris. Okay, where is this coming from? I don't know. Well, you can send me the link on that. What's the reason for interviewing Kamala Harris? She's running for president. Despite her podcast, Call Her Daddy, typically avoiding political topics. Cooper featured the vice president in a widely publicized episode released on Sunday, focused on the subject of women's rights, including abortion, explaining why she decided to discuss politics. This, by the way, from Newsweek, it turns out. Why did you decide to discuss politics? Cooper revealed that she had been going back and forward, probably forth, but okay, misspeak, maybe she was talking extemporaneously, back and forth/forward on this decision for a while to get involved or not to get involved. And she said, as you guys know, you do not usually discuss politics or have politicians on the show because I want Call Her Daddy to be a place where everyone feels comfortable tuning in. I guess she's got the same problem going on then as the other current popular figure that all the kids know and I don't, and I can't remember who it is, and she's a singer, and I had to kind of look that up, and I don't know how she says her name. Is it Chappell Roan? Is it Chappelle Roan? I have no idea, but because I am completely out of it, but enormously popular, out of nowhere, amazing success singer. These things happen. And I guess she got watching, Donald Trump tweeting, I hate Taylor Swift, probably had something to do with her saying, hey, I don't really want to get involved and I'm not going to endorse anybody for president. And I saw, of course, the story comes out, and she won't endorse for president. Well, of course she won't endorse for president. Who the hell is she? Why would she be endorsing anyone for president? And the fact is, if she's a huge pop star, that explains why I don't know her. But, don't. It's not your thing to be endorsing. You're going to ruin your career. You're going to end up being attacked, and bomb threats are going to happen if you endorse the wrong one. So, don't do it. I don't blame you. And then, of course, people were like, how could you, not endorse in the middle of all this? Look at what's happening. So I just bring that up as probably a good idea for whoever's figured out for Alex Cooper here. Well, I guess it's Alex Cooper has figured out what the golden ticket, right? I imagine there's a tremendous amount of money involved in her production and that she gets a lot of it. Do you really want to, threaten the golden goose by getting involved? But okay. Anyway, she wants it to be a place where everybody feels comfortable tuning in. But then reality hits her. I want everybody to be comfortable tuning in, but my audience is going to get killed if I don't speak up and say something. And so she did. All right, good. This comes from Newsweek's. Chappell. All right. Thank you for you checked the pronunciation for me. Thanks, Greg. Alex Cooper reveals why she interviewed Kamala Harris in Newsweek. So I will pocket that one so that I can pass it on to you. As Greg mentioned, Howard Stern also interviewing Kamala Harris tomorrow. It happens live tomorrow at 1 p.m. on the Sirius XM satellite radio network. Howard Stern, of course, having worked for many years there and has the ideal setup where basically you can do this on satellite radio, channels dedicated entirely to you and your program if you're the big superstar. And so you can just kind of, this is the dream. This was the dream that was supposed to happen for Kagro in the Morning thing was that you could use this live streaming type platform and podcasting type platform to basically not only make the programming on demand for listeners, but programming on demand for the hosts as well. I'll do the show when I damn well decide to do the show. And I don't have to worry about 9 a.m., this, that, or the other thing. I will if anyone else wants to participate in the show. But the idea was to have sort of an always-on channel at some point, which you could flip the switch. Something just happened on the news. It's time to do a show. It's going to last as long as it lasts. And you just do it that way. And he's built that kind of infrastructure for himself and so on. And now he has become a very different person than he was when he began broadcasting years ago. And for the majority of his career, a lot of people wouldn't listen to him because of his approach to, well, everything. But now he's he's gone through a lot of therapy in his life and realized how much of the things that he used to do could be considered hurtful, and has been a very changed person. And then, of course, with radio success superstardom, has been able to reach out and branch out and interview people that would have avoided him for a long time. And Kamala Harris, now one of them, and going on the show. All right, so that should be interesting to see, hear, and if you miss it at 1 p.m. tomorrow, I'm sure you can pick it up on demand later on. That's one of the advantages of the whole podcast, satellite radio, get away from linear television and reporting. And all the reporters who work for the linear companies are all upset because they can't do anything like this. And they can't land the interview. And too bad for them. All right, well, let's see. I guess, no, I don't really have, room to just continue playing them. But you should listen to the rest of the preview. Or, hey, go and listen to the entire episode. Would be, I'm sure, much more interesting to most of you to tune in and hear what she has to say. And I'm going to take Greg's advice and listen to the one, All the Smoke podcast episode as well. Now, there are other stories, as it turns out, that I wanted to share with you. Let me just see. Am I up to speed on things with Greg? Yes. Okay. So what else have I put aside for your edification today? I got to scroll down now and get past some of these things that were all parked here to facilitate the playing of these clips. I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about Elon Musk being on stage with Donald Trump and how much of his money comes from government contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And just want to point out, shoe on the other foot sort of thing here. All of the libertarian, we love freedom Republicans apparently are A-OK with this, but Donald Trump certainly makes no bones about it, and all the people who are trying to be Trumpy are now doing the same sort of thing. Donald Trump thinks that you should have the federal government weaponized against you if you oppose him. And part of his vision for how to run the government in any administration that he takes over, however he takes over it, includes the old Republican defund XYZ. Whatever it is I don't like, we're going to weaponize the government to defund anything that opposes us. And so, for instance, let's see. There's this one here in the Washington Post is the second or third instance I've seen something like this. And I think somewhere in Pocket I put away something where Ron DeSantis was doing the same thing in Florida, but my goodness, who knows how far back I have to go to try to find this thing. What I have in front of me now, I'll use as a launching pad. Washington Post, Peter Jameson reporting this one just today under the headline, Trump allies threaten Deloitte contracts after employee shares Vance chats. Republicans are targeting $3 billion in federal contracts after a consultant, who I guess works for Deloitte, disclosed messages which were unconnected to his work. Republicans backing Donald Trump are threatening Deloitte, a consulting firm that is one of the federal government's largest business partners, with the loss of billions of dollars in contracts because an employee shared messages from 2020 in which J.D. Vance, who is now the GOP vice presidential nominee, criticized the then president's record, which they knew about, and they knew that other people knew about it. And yet, here they are doing this anyhow, because something free speech is under threat, and we got to do something about it, and political correctness is going crazy on college campuses, and now they're going to target Deloitte because a guy who works there once had a conversation that actually happened with J.D. Vance, in which J.D. Vance said things that he actually said, and he told people that he had said them. Oh, no. On September 27th, Donald Trump Jr. exposed the employee's name and photograph to millions of people on social media, inviting, of course, stochastic terrorism. But anyway, maybe it's time, he writes, for the GOP to end Deloitte's taxpayer-funded gravy train. Others, including Vance's chief spokesman and a Republican senator, circulated Trump Jr.'s comments, and the conservative website Breitbart published a story naming the man and highlighting his job. Deloitte receives about $3 billion annually from federal agencies, including the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense. Ethics experts said the episode is a potentially ominous preview of how a second Trump administration might use the enormous power the federal government wields over private industry. Oh, no. I thought that was a huge cornerstone of Republican governance, but I guess not. And what would they be doing with it? Using it to punish political acts by individual workers. Although federal contracting laws prohibit cutting off a business because of its workers' private political views, such threats could have a chilling effect, they said. And I need to add, although federal contracting laws prohibit cutting off businesses because of its workers' private political views, Donald Trump and his supporters, who will be handpicked for personal loyalty to Trump if they populate a second Trump administration, do not care what the law says. They believe that even if the law does say they can't do this, that they are immune from prosecution because they would be carrying out the president's orders to personally persecute these people and to threaten the businesses that they work for. And even if they don't understand correctly how far presidential immunity extends, at the very least, it extends to the president, and he can and will happily pardon us after we commit this federal crime. And he himself won't be charged for it because it is, of course, something he would be immune from. Now, he won't pardon you. He doesn't care about you and will never hear your name. But he will, however, play clips of you singing the Star-Spangled Banner from prison at his next rallies. That's the big tribute that he'll pay to you. But, yeah, they really believe that this is going to be A-OK. Now we go on to the rest of the article. I've never seen anything like this, said Kedrick Payne, a senior director of ethics at the Nonpartisan Campaign Legal Center and former deputy chief counsel in the Office of Congressional Ethics, adding that the goal was probably to pressure Deloitte into firing the worker. But just like what happened with Julie Briskman here in Loudoun County, right? The woman you all perhaps remember riding her bike near the Trump golf course some number of years ago and giving the finger to his motorcade, right? And once they found out who she was, just a person biking by giving Trump the finger. That happens a million times a day. But they found out who she was and where she worked, and got her fired. And by the way, what did she do about that? She turned around and ran for office locally and won, and now represents on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors the district where Trump's stupid golf course actually sits. So thanks a lot for that one, Republicans. We actually appreciate that. But there you go. You can't imagine, the article continues here, that if one employee out of thousands made a statement that offended an official, that the government contracts would be in jeopardy. But there it is. And that's exactly how they threatened Julie's employer, too. You have federal contracts. We'll cut you off unless you fire her. And they did it because freedom. On September 27th, the Washington Post published a report about direct messages that Vance sent during the final year of Trump's presidency. I mean, that's not that long ago. Oh, I was a dumb kid then. Well, he's a dumb kid now. So, I mean, he's still young. But during the final year of Trump's presidency, 2 years before he became a senator, to be fair, but, I mean, the last presidential election, he's sending these comments to people. Among other remarks, Vance said in the messages that Trump had, quote, thoroughly failed to deliver, unquote, on his economic agenda in the White House and predicted that he would probably lose the election to Joe Biden. He was actually right. What are you worried about? The Post agreed before publication that it would not name the message's recipient, although now the name is out, and so I guess here it is, Kevin Gallagher, because they were concerned about possible retaliation. However, Gallagher said the Post could identify him later if he experienced reprisals from Trump, Vance, or their allies. So the Post is now naming Gallagher in keeping with that agreement. Gallagher declined to comment for this report. But there you have it. Okay, let's see. We're about, it's almost time to go into our third break here. The episode is the latest bout of public threats from Trump's MAGA movement. The former president has threatened to use the Justice Department to jail his opponents, among other things, if he wins a second term or steals one. Many Trump supporters on social media have urged that Gallagher be fired. Deloitte declined to address the questions about how it has handled the situation and whether Gallagher has been subject to any internal discipline. This individual shared private personal messages of his own volition without the knowledge of Deloitte, which is a nonpartisan firm. Doesn't sound like they're going to stand up for him at any point in the future. Deloitte's deeply committed to supporting our government and commercial clients. And no. It sounds like, they'll probably break in the end. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm searching desperately for the Florida story that goes along with this, but not finding it immediately. I mean, it's been a couple of days since it was discussed online, and I don't think I put the story aside because it was like, well, I mean, DeSantis is Trumpy, and he uses the power of the state government to threaten his political opponents. True. Not exactly yawn, but not something that we had the bandwidth to handle. But now, of course, I should have guessed that this would find a parallel in the Trump campaign, and then we would want to make that comparison. But I don't know. I thought I had perhaps commented on it and retweeted it at some point, and I'm not certain that I did or that I can find it all that quickly. But we'll search around, and I'll make a note to myself about finding that Florida story and see if I can't turn it up for you. But in the meantime, we'll finish up the Trump version of this story with Deloitte. As we had mentioned, it didn't sound like Deloitte was anywhere close to really finding the spine to stand up for itself in this one. Lots of weasel words and normal PR stuff. But then it's pointed out Deloitte has a political action committee that in recent elections has distributed spending across candidates in both parties. And so far in the 2024 cycle, it's given approximately $1.3 million to Republicans and $1.2 million to Democrats. Vance spokesman William Martin, who recirculated on his own Twitter account Trump Jr.'s post targeting Deloitte, said in a statement that Vance has not called for the company to lose its federal contracts and has no opinion on the issue. It would be a shame if something were to happen to your nice company, though. I guess. He also said that neither Vance nor Trump Jr. has explicitly called for Gallagher to be fired. No one actually said that, but come on. Trump Jr., through a spokesman, responded to questions for this report with a written statement calling the Post reporter a scumbag and asserting that there was nothing inappropriate about the social media post targeting Deloitte's contracts. I'm not saying he should be fired. I never actually said he should be fired. You're a scumbag. You should be fired. Okay. Great. Wonderful. So that's kind of where things stand with that one. I don't know if we need to go any further into this. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, and I guess they get screw it. This is a long thing, and I think you got the gist of it. Basically, that's all I'm going to give to you about this story. But just, you should know that this is happening, and that it's happening on the state level in Florida as well, and I'll try and find you the information on that one. Okay, I gotta get on to other crazy things that are happening that we need to get on the record, and we only got a half hour left to do it. One, in accompaniment to the stories about Donald Trump lying about the federal hurricane relief response, all of they're not there. Let's say he's accused Kamala Harris stole all the FEMA money and gave it to immigrants is one of the lies. They are targeting relief. They're only giving relief to Democrats, and if you're a registered Republican, they won't help you is the next lie. There's something about, the federal government is so out of touch, they don't understand what people are facing there. They're telling people that have lost their homes and everything they own, we're only going to give you $750, which is apparently, that was like, FEMA was on the spot, on the ground, saying, we can give everybody who's in trouble $750 right away, right now. No questions asked. You can use it for a hotel room. You can use it to buy groceries, whatever it is you need. And then we'll get around to the business of hearing what your problem is and what you need and trying to get you the money to make you whole, or as close to whole again as we possibly can. But rather than adjudicate all your claims for a year and then send you money once it's too late, we're giving you $750, I guess, is the story up front. And here you go. And then we'll deal with the rest of it later. It has turned into, no, that's all you're ever going to get. That's what they said. I heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy. All right. There's a number of other crazy things as well. Wow, some of them are crazier than others. Let's see. There's also, we mentioned Mike Brown running for governor in Indiana, and that the story resurfaced about him saying, leave interracial marriage legality to the states. I guess now everybody's digging up all of the horrible stories that they have found about him. And there are many. This one's been sitting in pocket for a little while from Politico from back on the 1st of October. An Indiana senator faked an ad. Now what? And I think, does this come with a blue sky thing? Oh, no, that's a different one. Okay. This was a hell of a story. What exactly are we talking about? It's surrounded by other pieces that I'm trying to see if they're related, but this one I think stands alone. An Indiana senator faked an ad. Now what? What do you mean faked an ad? Let's find out. Well, Politico, you know how they do things, bullet points, bold lines, why it matters, et cetera, et cetera. A Democrat, or is that Axios? Yeah. This is, like I said, is Politico. Adam Wren, W-R-E-N, is the reporter here. A Democrat standing at a podium while her supporters host signs declaring, "No gas stoves." Well, that's a potent political message, particularly in a barn-red state with a libertarian bent like Indiana. But, as you may have guessed, that scene, which debuted in the first ad of $1 million buy for Senator Mike Brown in Indiana's increasingly competitive gubernatorial race, never happened. The ad was digitally altered without any disclosure. It was unclear what editing technique was used or whether it literally involved AI. But at a moment of rising anxiety about AI-fueled disinformation, the campaign is now blowing up as a rare example of a high-profile candidate using digital trickery to falsely attack an opponent. In other words, they were portraying this as, look what's happening at my Democratic opponent's campaign rallies. They're holding up signs saying, no gas stoves, which, you know, of course, I'm sure by the time it reaches most people morphs into, and they're going to kick your door down and arrest you if you have a gas stove. No to all of it. It's not true. Brown's campaign and ad maker Jamestown Associates took a photo from the South Bend Tribune where his Democratic opponent, Jennifer McCormick, was speaking at a campaign rally with her own campaign signs behind her. In other words, having a rally, people behind her holding up signs. Signs said, Jennifer McCormick for governor. They digitally alter that to change it so that the signs say no gas stoves. Now, mind you, this is in a world where it is not a digital trick to show you pictures of what they were doing at the Republican National Convention, holding up signs that said mass deportation now. They actually did that. So, of course, every Republican accusation being a confession, right? They did that, and so, we'll make it so that Democrats are holding up crazy declaration signs as well, and then we can say, well, both sides equally crazy. Anyhow, that's not what happened. Right, so they digitally altered the signs. The campaign didn't answer any questions about how it made the ad, whether that is to say, did you just use plain old Photoshop, or did you AI, burn up 1,000 gallons of water saying, AI, give me a picture of a Jennifer McCormick rally, and the people behind should be holding up signs that say no gas stoves. That was your particular genius to ask for that. All right. Well, in the altered ad, the supporters weren't holding up campaign signs, but signs that featured a picture of a gas stove inside a red no symbol, the prohibited / right? Gas stoves were never talked about at the event, so it wasn't even like they embellished what happened. There's no federal campaign law about deep fake images, but Indiana has one. How nice. They left it to the states. Isn't that something? And guess what? Indiana made it illegal. Oh, well. The Brown ad is testing a relatively new state law passed in March mandating that deep fake images, audio or video, as part of a campaign message needed to have a disclosure, or else the target of them could sue. Indiana is one of 20 states with similar laws. Forget suing. Just throw the other candidate in jail. Just do that. I guess that's black and white. Don't they like that? Anyway, even if they don't, however, the ad crisply highlights the complexity of regulating such material. That is to say, even if they don't. States that don't have such a law. But Indiana does, and he wants to be governor there. After DFD reached out to the campaign, DFD, is this the column that we're reading? Digital Future Daily. Okay, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, DFD. After DFD reached out to the campaign on Monday, a week ago, pointing out that the digitally altered image, pointing out the image that it was digitally altered, the campaign released a new version of the ad with the required disclosure, noting that it contained images that had been digitally altered. When we called Josh Kelly, a senior advisor for the campaign, he said the first release was an error. Oh, whoops, we forgot. Golly. An earlier version was mistakenly delivered to TV stations and is being replaced with the correct version. Which, of course, I'm sure was an overt decision. Should we put it in there? No, don't put it in there. Well, people could sue you. Well, if they sue you or if someone alerts you to it, you say, it was a mistake. We forgot. Here's the version with it. We just happen to have it ready. So we'll dispatch it to the TV stations. But something, build a wall, black and white, throw them in jail. Yeah, mistake. Well, what if we applied the same reasoning to you? Nope, sorry, your candidate goes to prison. But then the campaign decided to claim that the ad, after making this error, or claiming that they made an error, they decided to claim that the ad was a kind of technological and ethical breakthrough. So they're actually in favor of it now without the disclosure. Mike Brown is the first candidate to comply with this new law, which requires a disclaimer for any alteration from an original image, even though his opponent has altered his appearance in her paid advertisements without a disclaimer. So she did it. And she should have complied first, but she didn't. I don't know. I don't know if there's any grain of truth to that or not. Doesn't matter. That's some spin, though. We caught you red-handed breaking this law. Well, it was a mistake. Here's the correct version with us complying and then announcing, congratulations to me, the first person to comply with this law. Well, he didn't stop there. Kelly also criticized the law itself, foreshadowing a debate that could continue as the technology proliferates. The law seems to imply that any image or video not exactly as it was originally printed or aired could be a violation of the law. And clearly Jennifer McCormick has altered Mike Brown's appearance and deceptively edited his speech in TV ads in an effort to mislead voters without the required disclaimer, Kelly said. Well, it's not clear that this was the case. Beyond the campaign editing Brown's conversation with NBC's Chuck Todd on abortion, over which the campaign laid some white static, a more run-of-the-mill campaign gimmick. Yeah, that's a real stretch. Okay, so now what? Well, according to Ad Impact, the ad without the required attribution has run more than 100 times and was still in rotation at some television stations as late as Tuesday afternoon, an apparent violation of the law. Even as Kelly said, television stations had instructions Monday not to run that version. And another complexity. McCormick isn't the only politician in the altered image. There is at least one state representative and as many as 5 other politicians pictured, meaning all these candidates could have standing to sue Brown's campaign under the new law. So far, none of them have done so. Why not? It's early. Maybe by now they have. But politically, Brown's opponent is trying to use it against him. Brown's team is so desperate to distract voters that they've stooped to using heavily doctored images. Disclaimer or not, it's just dishonest, McCormick campaign manager Kelly Whitman said. That's not to be confused with, her first name is Kelly Whitman, whereas the spokesperson for the Mike Brown campaign's last name is Kelly. So it's a little weird and a little bit confusing. Let's see. We left off there. All of this exposes, was a little bit more about this. It's dishonest. And Indiana has a law in place for a reason. Hoosiers deserve the truth, not deep fakes and dishonesty. The campaign did not answer a question about whether it would sue. All of this exposes the uncertain terrain ahead. In this instance, it's not clear whether the ad was in fact edited using AI, though the Indiana law is written broadly enough that other technology is included in the net, and it's not at all clear that the campaign's use of editing will actually work to its advantage. Robert Weissman, co-president of Public Citizen, a nonprofit advocacy group focused on impacts of AI on democracy and society. Oh, is it now? Is that what it's decided it is? Completely changing direction. That he said that even with the disclosure, the instance shows the potentially deleterious impact of the new technology and what it can have on democracy, and that the solutions are as imperfect as the threats are complex. The disclosure is real here. It could be more prominent, but the fact that it doesn't point out exactly what is manipulated, it sure changes the viewer's impression. Okay, that is true. And I guess that's actually the end of it. They move on to something else entirely after that. Just I thought it was interesting. And yeah, kind of a touchy and ticklish issue. And I just really love that spin. Oh, we were caught red-handed. We're the first ones to not be caught red-handed, but to comply, to be forced eventually to comply with this law. All right. Let's see. Other things to share with you. There's lots of interesting reaction and analysis to the Jack Smith filing, which we read to you Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Some of which we probably will want to round up. Perhaps tomorrow can be a roundup day for that. These things will take us to the end of the program if we read them. Some of them, it's too long form and or weedy form entries. The first being over at Lawfare Media. And I think we actually probably did a lot of this explaining along the way as we were reading it. They write over there, Jack Smith makes his case explaining the legal, the Section 3, really, the legal application of the Supreme Court's ruling to the fact recitation that he included in Part 1. And then, of course, Empty Wheels, rather weedy, look at something else interesting. All hell is going to break loose. Maybe Jack Smith did precisely what Illy Honig, I guess, claims he didn't. Yeah, okay, opening up the piece, I can see the whole title here. But an interesting analysis of what's in the filing and what's not. mentioned in the filing, which she uses to reach some interesting conclusions. Perhaps we can discuss some of those later on in the week. Other smaller bore stories, I guess, to read alongside the one from Indiana. Also flopping. He may just go ahead and win, Brown, in Indiana. It's a red state. It's likely that he's but I guess an increasingly competitive gubernatorial race, so that's good news. Here in the Daily Beast. Oh, can I read this thing? A Philly restaurant, another one of the cheesesteak places, has banned a Republican candidate, the GOP nominee for Senate, after he claimed that a campaign stop was an autism event. That's interesting twist on things. Just to let you know what increasingly desperate Republican candidates are doing around the country. Here again in the Daily Beast. It starts out with, "You're not welcome back." That's the message the manager of Philadelphia cheesesteak joint Max's Steaks had for Pennsylvania Republican U.S. Senate candidate Dave McCormick after his campaign held an event outside the restaurant on Friday that the eatery was told would be about autism awareness. How do you like that? That's some cover. Mike Sfida, S-F-I-D-A, I guess that's the pronunciation, who agreed to hold the event because his niece and nephew have autism, was alarmed, I guess we should say are autistic versus have, well, okay, that's what it says, was alarmed when he saw Donald Trump signs being hung outside the beloved North Philly spot on Friday. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported McCormick arrived, gave a campaign stump address, and then handed out free sandwiches. We didn't sign up for all that at all. We didn't sign up for that at all. Zero, he told the newspaper after the event, which he allowed the McCormick team to finish before making clear that they should stay away from his restaurant thereafter. I could throw them all out of here, but I'm going to be nice. Do your thing. When you're done, leave. You're not welcome back. Sfida told the Inquirer it was a local Republican operative, Sheila Armstrong, who contacted him to schedule the event, which she did on behalf of her nonprofit organization, Cooking for Autism, without mentioning McCormick's campaign. That does sound familiar. Where have we run into that before? I think we must have read something where that came up again. What was she doing that was... I'm sure it must have been something shady. Otherwise, there's no real reason why it would have come up. But didn't she do something else with that as cover at some point? I'll have to look around and see what I can find in... if there's any mention in our archives of pocketed stories. Anyway, she did this on behalf of her nonprofit organization, Cooking for Autism, without mentioning McCormick's campaign. Set this whole thing up. Armstrong is a member of the anti-LGBTQ group Moms for Liberty. Is that where this came from? Which campaigns against school curricula that discusses LGBT rights or race, and which the civil rights group Southern Poverty Law Center has classified as a far-right extremist group. She was a paid staffer, or maybe this is it, for the failed campaign of Republican Mehmet Oz, who lost to U.S. Senator John Fetterman in 2022, but the Inquirer reported appears to have no official affiliation with McCormick. She told the newspaper she offered to be a liaison for the GOP candidate in Philadelphia. Pressed by the newspaper about whether the campaign stop was an autism awareness event, Armstrong claimed, "It's always autism awareness because I'm an education advocate." That doesn't make any sense either. And she spoke to those gathered about autism at one point. "We certainly apologize for any confusion," said a spokesperson for McCormick, but the disaster didn't end there. After showing up at a cheesecake restaurant to campaign under the auspice of an autism awareness event, McCormick then went across the street to East Bethel Baptist Church, which happened to be holding an outdoor fundraiser for its food ministry. The Reverend Thomas Edwards Jr., who leads the church, told the campaign to leave because he didn't want the GOP candidate to use photos of his congregation for campaigning purposes. Watch this. "You can Photoshop," he told the Inquirer. "You can make things seem like they aren't. Maybe they're going to post that we're eating dogs or cats, like in Ohio. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't trust these people." A good eye there for the pastor to be watching out for that and not let it happen to his congregation. But that's interesting too. He's basically running around Philadelphia trying to co-opt events. And I read a little bit of the Philly Inquirer story. Armstrong is basically trying to establish some kind of presence for the campaign in Philly, which is extremely tough. And holding events in their own right is not going to bring people out. So instead, they pretend that they're going to have an autism awareness event, and then all of a sudden, out come Donald Trump signs, not even McCormick signs, but out come Donald Trump signs, and then McCormick shows up and does a campaign shtick, and when they throw him out, too late. I already had the event. You threw me out of the cheesesteak place? Fine. Going across the street to the church and go there. Oh, they threw me out of there too? Doesn't matter. I now had 2 events in Philadelphia, and I think the Philly Inquirer article mentioned that I guess Armstrong had somehow, in cooperation with the campaign, challenged McCormick to spend more time in Philadelphia. So that's how he did it. Well, now I've done it. I've been in Philadelphia. Challenge met. Yeah. All right. So there you go. Well, I thought I would bring that to your attention just to throw that out there along with other dirty campaign tactics that the Republicans are using in their races across the country. Come on, Pocket. Well, Pocket's been slowing down a lot lately. Let's see what else we can fit in the time we have remaining. Well, yeah, that's a good one. Again, more reaction to the Jack Smith filing. Let's throw this one in there. Maybe we can fit these 2 pieces in before we get done. Something from the Huff Post here, just to bring you up to speed on, kernels of truth that do or don't break through or get turned into something else. They're reporting that someone was, in fact, arrested for killing geese in Springfield, Ohio. But guess what? You'll never believe it. It wasn't a Haitian. How do you like that? In fact, it was a white dude. Brian Comer, 64-year-old white man, accused of illegally hunting geese at a golf course. And golfers, I think, all understand why people want to illegally hunt geese at the golf course, but you're not allowed to do it. And he did that on the day that Trump amplified racist lies about Haitian immigrants in the city. And they say it like he did it on the day that Trump amplified those lies. Trump amplifies those lies every day. I don't know which day it is. Oh my goodness, the reporter has a name that I do not recognize. It's going to give me a minute here to work on this one. Pochaperon Neamani. My best attempt. Like totally cold on this name. It's a new one for me. Anyway, more important, I try to give some credit for this, but more important is the substance of the story. A 64-year-old white man in Springfield, Ohio, and there's no white people left in Springfield, Ohio. It's all been burned to the ground. Something. Anyway, he was accused of illegally hunting geese at a golf course pond, as former President Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance were spreading racist lies that Haitian immigrants in the area were eating geese and people's pets. Of course, Brian Comer was charged with a misdemeanor in connection with the September 10th incident. That's the day we're talking about in which Trump amplified the lies. All the other days that he amplified lies are just, regular days. And according to the arrest affidavit obtained by HuffPost, a golfer at Rocky Lakes Golf Course in Springfield reported seeing a Canada goose floating in a pond, dead. Not, I saw a goose floating in a pond. Yeah, that's what geese do. Oh, this one was dead. Oh, I see. So floating dead in a pond. And Comer using a shotgun to shoot another bird, which, by the way, now, in fairness, he had been given instructions by the groundskeeper to shoot all the gophers. And he didn't want to do that because he thought that they'd put him away. But he could shoot the geese, I guess. He's firing a shotgun on a golf course, which, as you may know, is very often populated by people who could be shot. And a shotgun scatter gun like that, it's not super smart, to be sure. And then, as it goes into in the rest of the article, like, who told you could just shoot geese on a golf course? This guy's 64, white, Springfield, Ohioan, and he's like, I don't know, I guess, I thought that was legal. Okay, it's not. Comer didn't immediately respond to a request for comment from HuffPost, but court records show he entered a guilty plea. I guess they finally convinced him that he shouldn't be doing that. A court spokesperson told HuffPost he paid $200 to cover a fine and court fees. Journalist Steve Monticelli first posted about the arrest on Thursday on Twitter, and there's a link to it. According to the affidavit by an Ohio Division of Wildlife officer, the golfer approached Comer about the dead goose on the pond, and Comer said there would be several more dead geese in a few minutes. Comer reportedly then got on his lawnmower with a shotgun and fired twice, killing a second goose. So, terrific. The golfer told police that Comer picked up the first goose and tossed it into the weeds and then broke the neck of the second bird, which had been wounded, according to the affidavit. Officers who spoke with the golf course manager the following day learned that Comer was an employee. Oh, okay. According to the affidavit. That at least makes some kind of sense. They really did tell him to kill all the golfers. The manager told authorities that she allowed several individuals, including Comer, to hunt on the property and claimed he should have all appropriate licenses and permits. However, when authorities checked with the Division of Wildlife Licensing and Harvest database, Comer did not have the certifications to hunt migratory birds, according to the affidavit. So, that's a problem. Comer told authorities over the phone that he was cutting the grass at the course that day and wanted to shoot a few geese, but admitted he did not have the necessary license and permits, according to the affidavit, and just decided to discharge firearms in the middle of the golfing day. He insisted he believed he was permitted to do so, thinking the golf course had a nuisance permit. The state allows the killing of geese under nuisance permits, by the way, only from March to August. And so, I don't know, I heard about this thing and I figured I'm a white guy, and what could be the problem? I thought they had a permit. They thought I had a permit. Golly, it was a big misunderstanding. According to court records, Comer was arraigned on September 18th on fourth-degree misdemeanor count of prohibited activities against state-owned wild animals. The incident at Rocky Lakes Golf Course happened on the same day of the presidential debate between Trump and Harris. During the debate, Trump repeated the baseless claim that Haitian immigrants were doing this and eating pets, et cetera, et cetera. So you get the idea. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources said it found no proof that Haitian immigrants were taking geese or ducks. A viral photo of a black man holding a goose was actually taken in Columbus, where there's been no evidence of Haitian immigrants harming immigrants. So you get the idea about how it became a game of telephone there. By the way, I was wondering, if he were to shoot these geese, sometimes they do the nuisance hunting and they give the geese away to anybody who wants them, to eat. I suppose they are edible. People hunt wild geese and then eat them. And whether the person that was photographed with a goose in Columbus had gotten a hold of the goose in exactly that way. So white guys are running around shooting the geese, and other people are walking around saying, well, I won't let the goose go to waste. That was actually the best thing you could have done once the geese were killed. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. The guy had no permit. The golf course was like, I don't know, we figured he did. And go ahead and do that. Just fire your shotgun on a golf course. It's A-OK.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, anyway. Okay, so we wrap it up for today. It's Monday. We still got plenty of show left for the rest of the week. We'll get to these other stories and more, and so will Justice Putnam, who brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. Starting off with what? Musk vowed to keep Twitter a non-biased platform, but he's done the opposite and transformed the platform into a political tool to help Trump. Duh! We knew he'd do this. See you tomorrow.